I think there are two parts to this. First part is, if you look at the export market, I think that's largely business as usual. At the end of the day, most of these protests are taking place in the middle of Bangkok rather than in the manufacturing hubs. So we've seen this before. We've seen Thailand being occupied by protesters for weeks and months on end, but the reality, the impact on manufacturing is limited, even on tourism, despite the very visual images that we see. The historical impact on tourist arrival, it's temporary and quite limited, because what happens is tourists actually go off to somewhere else, like to Phuket or to Koh Samui. So the economic impact, I think, will still be relatively contained from that perspective. What could hurt really is on the investment side, because the political uncertainty that's coming up with these protests, I think that will make both local companies and foreign companies just to wait a little bit more before they engage in another round of investment. And of course, with an election coming up, again, governments may postpone any spending program until after the election, when there's a bit more clarity. So in that sense, I think while the exports, the cyclical front will still be running okay, I'm a bit more concerned on the investment side of the story in Thailand, which has been really lacking for the past few years. Well, I think it had a very strong run in the past 5 years, and I believe that a lot of the structural aspects of ASEAN is still largely intact. It's still a huge economy with a very vibrant population and consumer base, and really a lack of infrastructure that could, again, present opportunities. But I think what's happened really here is that after several years of strong growth, there are imbalances, for example, current account deficits in Indonesia, the fiscal position in Malaysia, as you rightly pointed out, the excesses in the housing market in Singapore. I think this will take time for that to work itself out, which implies that growth in this part of the region may take one or two notches down compared to what we've had, but far from a crisis situation back in '97. So I think if you look at the region, while during the summer of 2013, people are looking at a sort of revisit of financial crisis, I think that's overdone. The reality is, I think the economy in ASEAN needs to really slow down just a notch to rebalance itself and then prepare for next phase of growth. So I think 2014 will still be challenging, but I think the overall fundamentals of the region is still largely intact. Fed tapering certainly is going to be on the investment landscape of every investor in the world. I think also at the same time, one thing we look at is how does Asia or Southeast Asia responds to a stronger US and Europe or developed market as a whole, because that's been frankly lacking for the past few years. So if countries like Singapore or Malaysia or Thailand, they can feed part of their economy through the recovery in the developed markets, that's an extra engine that can offset some of the domestic adjustments that we just talked about.